A pure white space is seen but appears to be a goddess right before us. He was happy to have an encounter with her. In other words, he was dead. I guess the novels he read were true. Transmigration would mean he would have great powers and find lovely women. He was ready to lose his virginity in the new world. The goddess started to ridicule his love life, calling him Mr. Virgin. Don't laugh, it applies to you too. He could retort because of how true it was, but thanks to his sister's sharp tongue, his resistance to verbal abuse was solid. The reason he died was from colliding with a female who fell off a building. He fell prey to her peach, and the goddess was smiling mischievously. He didn't desire to be sat on by a woman, but he didn't feel the softness. He asked about the girl who fell onto him. Fortunately, she was saved by his efforts. She saved his mortal life because of his good deed, allowing him to receive a special favor. He thought about it hard and realized it was the pattern he was waiting for. He would be reincarnated in a fantasy setting possessing another person. The goddess was lowering a screen and hoped it would work. A boy named Alan, with a small body, either 17 or 18 years old. He was looking at his body, realizing doing the deed with an older person would show great compatibility. With that body, he would have a higher but slim chance of fulfilling his wish. The goddess was playing with him and wished she would toy with somebody else. She asked if he wanted to die, and he told her to not peek into his thoughts. He asked if they'd share the same personality in Alan's body, but he will die soon, because he would enter a dungeon as a novice. When he dies, she will insert his body into his. Our thoughtful main character said, wouldn't the body become monster meat? He didn't want to become a smelly zombie because he was called that in his past life. The goddess was going to give him a transmigrator privilege. The skill was regeneration. He thought it was crazy to be able to cheat death in every possible way. He was ready to leave his virginity. If he used his skill on a female, they'd be filled with gratitude. No more questions were needed, and he was all set. There was no reason to shrink away when a glorious new life was going to begin. His new life in another world for sure awaited him. Watch him as he becomes a harem king with sparkles in his eyes. He is now Alan, and 3 years have passed since he started living there. He was soon building up a new record for his being a virgin. There were many miscalculations he didn't account for, like not being able to have a conversation. Number 1, fighting monsters was difficult, and he couldn't learn magic by leveling up. Next, he couldn't cut his pain receptors, so even a slime would body him. He is a total loner and cannot find a party. He was unable to use regeneration in front of others because it was superior to healing, and the church holds authority being a dangerous organization. He has finally arrived at his destination, being a slave trader. His 85 IQ brain decided to work at a clinic and act like he was using heal. With a slave, he would give any order and they would have to follow it because of the slave crest, a foolproof plan that shall lead to his harem. Some donkey say and ask what rank of slave he desires. He wanted to see everything, failing to be confident. The slave trader showed him everybody, and he was concerned about the amount of zeros that the price tag mentions. He was ready to show his intelligence and go for an attack. He did some dress to impress Pose, asking if he had others. This startled the trader. He was begging for a lucky find and was brought to an unpleasant place with cobwebs all over. 2 unpleasant slaves showed their hatred towards him. He asked who they were, and they were both rare elf slaves. He decided to take them both as his slave. The sum blew away his savings, but he wanted to return their dignity as soon as possible. He was on a wooden cart, hoping nobody would see him. Turning around, he told his slaves that there was nothing to worry about. They have endured a lot, and decided to use his skill of regeneration. Their tattered clothes and scars were restored to how they were before. He was shocked because of how they appeared. Meanwhile, the slaves were shocked they could see their bodies. This made him pause, realizing he had turned them into pretty babes, and they asked for his name. He was scared to talk to them and slowly said his name. At least his harem in another world was starting to begin. The slaves he bought are an ancient elf named Sylphie and an elder dwarf named Noel. Besides that, everything about them is a mystery, because he can't read or write in that world. He started to garden in an attempt to grow food while Sylphie interrupted. She was dazzling enough to make our Alan blush. He was going to grow yams and asked if she liked it or not. She asked if he was growing them, and he was in shock. He was going to stop until yams were produced, and he happened to go to the town to buy food. He offered grapes to Noel. She thanked him, and they both were very wary of our dude. He couldn't just ask them for sex and needed a better occasion to go ask. He stopped crying and needed to work for money, therefore he went to the town. He asked the elves if they wanted to eat something, but they didn't want anything in particular. His plan to lure them up in flames, and he left them alone to go. Sylphie couldn't believe he left them slaves to go to the town. They had their powers back and could easily break out of the slave crest. She wondered if he wanted to test their loyalty, wanting to understand why he was growing yams. She was in disbelief that he didn't ask her to grow vegetables with her powers if he read the appraisal scroll. By using her powers, they would instantly grow, and just an order was enough. He didn't know his intentions of saving them, and she believed he didn't want their bodies. She decided to follow him. She was at his clinic, and he was using heal instead of restoration. If the church learnt this, he could have any position he wanted as well as not working for a low sum of money. The girl thanked Alan for running away, while Sylphie thought to refocus. Just the thought of him displaying kindness made her think well of him. She thought he was just putting on an act because he buys slaves, but at the same time he didn't do anything about that. She couldn't predict what he was thinking about. The cloud looks like a tit, he thought. The first yams were being harvested after 3 months, and Sylphie asked why she wasn't being used to raise food. He wondered if she wanted to work, but thanks to his restoration skill, he can clear his fatigue in no time. He was glad for her consideration, and with her skill, she can harvest crops immediately. She gave him an example by sporting a whole yam, I would assume. He was in disbelief. The cheat-level skill surprised him. He thought she was just hiding her power, and she asked if knew about it. After all, it was in the appraisal scroll that he couldn't read. He wondered if he should tell the truth, and he can't just proclaim he is a baby who can't read or write. It's too shameful for him, and he has to look after his girls. Maybe a lie would solve it. He had to think quick for a rebuttal, or else he'll be branded as a pervert. Commencing the bullshit, he said, magic is a two-sided coin that can either be poison or a cure. He doesn't want to force others using magic, and he could do anything he wanted to. He didn't even know what he was saying in the first place. He just wanted to make out with them, and was so embarrassed he decided to go harvesting. Sylphie was astonished, not knowing what to say. Alan's expression changed, but his heart had deep wounds. He was trying to persuade himself, and he experienced the same. She believed he thought he could do anything with his powers, but something happened to change his views. She also used to flaunt her magic in every way. Sylphie decided to talk to Noel about their future. Alan went harvesting, and something caught his eye that made him incredulous. "What is this?" he said at the top of his lungs, staring at a bunch of yams. He was stressing over Sylphie having an overpowered ability even though he is a reincarnator. She was also harvesting, and he was wondering why. She wondered if she was too hasty, even though it was her own will. That was what he said yesterday, and wondered if she was looking for fault. His modern knowledge was useless in front of her. He was sobbing because he couldn't show his farming skills. Hope was still there because he had something left to show. He was making concrete to create infrastructure the world had never seen. Noel asked what he was doing. She smelled he was creating things and wanted to join in. It was the first time Noel spoke up, and she asked what he wanted to make. He wanted to make a new house with concrete, and she dashed to his face, asking what is concrete. He taught her how, and with sparkles in her eyes, she asked what certain items were. He started to talk and felt good when he knew Noel was listening. Eventually, he finished teaching her, and with practice, she will get it. But she just wanted him to sit and watch. Immediately, Noel used a skill called extraction. She summoned all the materials needed, and this would ruin his chances of contribution. Noel was glamorously performing the tasks, and he thought she was a cheat skill user too. While he was in despair, the cement that was made wasn't very good. He realized how proudly he said the things, and Noel went to Syphie to grow bamboo sprouts. He thought in order words they were joining hands to start a revolution against him. Eventually, 3 houses were built, and he didn't know what to say. Noel was a manufacturing master, and Sylphie was good at planting. He didn't know why it turned out like that while they went inside. He wanted a better cheat skill and wondered why they have better ones. Meanwhile, the goddess was finding it entertaining and would make fun of him. Noel's dwarven instincts were reacting when talking to Alan, her first time experiencing this. Alan wasn't a simple nobody, and his skill was good, and he was not flaunting it too. He even taught an elder dwarf many things which made her happy. Saifi was putting her trust into Alan, and she too decided to put trust into Alan. She was praying and decided to do something big while wanting to take the weight off Alan's shoulders. When Alan woke up, there were 2 monasteries. Noel was around the corner, and she built 3 of them for each of them while walking up. She was close to Alan and said she worked very hard. She wanted to be praised. Sylphie was behind him saying he should praise her, and he understood they were ganging up on his poor soul. He thought they were thinking how poor he was, and irrelevant. A total virgin, and that's why Noel built more buildings. Alan was trembling with these thoughts, getting called a pig and more. Noel and Sylphie were looking at Alan, wondering what he was doing. He came from so far and decided he was in the position to praise Noel. That means he was allowed to pat her head as much as he wanted to. He patted Noel's head while thanking her. Noel was happy her savior was doing as said. Alan's heart was being purified by her silky smooth hair, and Sylphie was really jealous of his actions. Noel was blushing, so he gave her a nice pat while Sipli thought he was going so far with intimacy. She wanted to calm down, after all she was of the highest elf species. Starting from tomorrow, she will grow more plants, having no ulterior motives. A couple of months passed quickly, and Alan was tending to the fields, forgetting the magic Sylphie wields. Magic has 5 attributes, and Sylphie has a wind attribute for plants and Noel fire and metal. Food and dwelling is what they represent. They can use magic whenever they want to, and Alan never forced them. He is not blinded by desire or conflict, although he takes a particular interest in yams. She was sure he had intentions and wanted to learn his real feelings. Sylphie went to Alan and asked why he decided to buy both of them. Well, he just wanted to have sex but couldn't say that. Noel peeped from behind Sylphie and wanted to know too. They could make up for the deficiencies around him and asked if had any will. He became a baby when thinking of why he was always kind to them. He started crying with a question, "Why are you not tapping to our potential?" They gave him a home and food, he wouldn't tap into their potential. He was crying because he would lick their feet if asked, but with a stern face realized he would gladly do it. They started to show their magic to Alan one by one. He thought those 2 were going to destroy his self-esteem. He wanted to have sex, but said he wanted to cure world hunger. This shocked the lovely elves, and it was like a blade pierced through Alan's body. Sylphie thought of this idea, and thought the way he treasures yams may align with his goals, and his expression is for the sake of the vision he sees. Sylphie took a look at Noel. She was still not going to fully put her trust into him, but she elegantly strided to his side. She wanted to follow him to see what he would achieve and had to cultivate land. Alan was confused with questions flying through his head.